They have, like,
Been
one last
2
name.
years. Ah.
He went check out the Marietta gym just so we could look around and be like,
Yeah,
let me see how shitty this is.
He just wanted to see
Man,
how
it
health
stinks in
works out.
It smells like broken here.
All right. All right, everyone. Welcome. I'm glad that you all could join us, especially those who are new here. Today's presentation is going to be done by me, and it will be on CompTIA Security Plus. If you cannot tell from the giant screen I have plastered in front of your faces. So, raise of hands here. Does anyone know what the Security Plus certification is?
I have no idea.
Okay, we got some hands here. Basically, the CompTIA Security Plus is your generalist certification for cybersecurity. It doesn't really mean you're good at anything specific, but it shows that you have a basic understanding of the landscape of cybersecurity, at least when it comes to like blue team. We'll dive into more details of like the specific parts of the Security Plus, but just kind of know that this is mostly talking about the terms that you might see while working there. It talks about basic policy that you will encounter while you're working there. It will also go into some aspects of the like legality and the financials of cybersecurity, because at least in terms of this certification, they put an emphasis on equal parts technical and managerial aspects of cybersecurity. Like I said, kind of like an all-rounder certification. Without any further ado, we'll get into the specifics of the Security Plus. So like I said, what is Security Plus? It's generalist. Nomenclature, like I said earlier, the terms. You'll see, let me tell you, cybersecurity people, they love their acronyms. Honestly, a bit too much in my opinion. I swear, you can't read a single like article about cybersecurity and you won't at least see one acronym. You probably see 10 acronyms, whether that's for thread or some sort of software that they're using, like SIMS or
In the quiz that I use to study acronyms, there's over 300. Like.
Oh yeah. Once I'm done with my presentation, I'm going to show you some general resources. One of those resources is that if you go to the CompTIA website, they have like a objectives, which is like a 4 to 5 page PDF that just goes over the high view of like what they expect you to know. At the very end, they like list every single acronym that is possible to show up on there. It's like 2 full pages of just acronym. Granted, most of the time, you won't need to know most of them. There's generally like, I would probably say like 40 or 50 acronyms, which are like the acronyms you would actually see like day to day that are the important ones and that you'll see on the test. Well, the rest are more obscure ones that like you might see once or twice, but you don't really need to like give deep focus on. Like I said, this is part of the pamphlet that I pulled. Actually, this one you can actually is on their website. It kind of shows you the breakdown of the exam itself and what percentages of the exam are based on things. So you can see there's general security concept, there are threats, vulnerability, and mitigations, security architecture, security operations, and then security program management and oversight. And you can see that the percentages broken down. It's important to note that oftentimes questions will pull from multiple of these domains. For example, general security concepts is only 12%. You might think that's a little low for something called general security concepts, but that's generally because everything else is built on these concepts. So they'll be like, you need to know both this general concept and then how it applies to the specific problem that you're working on. So let's start with the basics of security. That text message that was definitely sent to you from USPS about a lost package you totally ordered yesterday. I'll mention this again later. When you're practicing for the exam, it is very important that you do practice questions because CompTIA, they have a format for their questions that they love, and they have a very specific way they want you to answer that formula. And one of the most common questions you'll probably see is this, which is that they basically break down almost any type of security problem into a type and a method. And what that means is the type is like, what is the core problem of the issue? For example, you say technical. A technical type issue would be you're having issues with computer. Let's say your computer is unable to connect to the internet. That would be considered a technical problem because the issue at hand is something that you need to work with the technology to solve. Versus something like managerial, where that would be more of a person type problem. And that usually deals with like how management is interacting with the problem. And then you've got methods. Methods are how you would solve this problem or what is needed to solve them. An easy example of combining these two would be, for example, physical deterrent. Does anyone know what a physical deterrent might be?
Barrier.
Security guard.
Yeah, security guard, barrier,
Cameras.
Yes, those are all physical things that exist that are deterring other people from doing something. In this case, would be like theft or reconnaissance. Another example would be physical compensating. A compensating method is something that basically means you can't solve the core problem, but you've taken steps to protect around that core problem. So, for example, a physical compensating problem, I remember the story as there was a data center that they're basically building a data center in the city. One of the requirements of data center cities is that they have to have anti-vehicle rods around them, so you can't have a vehicle just ram into it. But the city basically said that you can't put those in the just because they were building in such a tight space, they didn't have the necessary space to put it in. So what they did was they just raised the data center up a floor and just had the base of the building be that anti-vehicle guard. Now, that's a very expensive and complicated physical compensation, but that is an example of one. And like I said, when you're doing practice examples, you'll see these plenty of them, and I am very confident you'll probably see at least 2 or 3 questions on the exam that follows a format of, here is this thing, what is the type and method of it? The next part of Security Plus is you're going to need to learn a lot of frameworks. Cybersecurity people, they love their frameworks, which is basically a fancy word of acronyms, just in a different way. By far the most important ones are the CIA triad, which you can kind of see here as confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you've literally touched anything cybersecurity in an educational sense, you've probably already seen these words. They are super common, just because it's like pretty much the CIA is like the core of what cybersecurity is about. It's about protecting the availability of resources. It's about protecting who can see it, and it's protecting who can edit it. And really, what is cybersecurity outside of doing those 3 things, just in fancier and fancier ways? But then there's, we can get more acronyms later, but like you've got the AAA, authentication, authorizing and accounting, zero trust, all sorts of different methods. Again, trying to keep it brief. This is mostly just kind of show you what Security Plus is. So then we'll move on to the next section, threat vulnerability and mitigation. Yeah. All right. Attack vectors. Attack vector, straightforward. How do you get attacked? By far the most common one, and what you'll see basically day to day, is phishing, specifically through email. Email is still probably, now that I have firsthand experience with that, it's so boring and kind of like painful sometimes. I can't tell you the amount of times on my fingers that we've had breaches just because someone got sent a Google or Microsoft form and thought it was a great idea to put all of their credentials into But it's an example of an attack vector, which there comes many forms. You've got ports, which is where you're just going computer to computer, the phishings. And phishing doesn't have to be email, even though that is the most common one. You can see it in forms of video calls, texting, and whatnot. And then you've got threat actors, which these are the people who are doing the hacking, or in some cases hacking. Again, on the exam, they'll be broken down into 3 different categories. You'll have your strip kiddies, which these are just like individuals who just Googled some stuff and want to seem cool and want to hack stuff. You've got hacktivists, which these are people who are hacking for some sort of social or political justification. Nation states, these are going to be your Russia, China, North Korea. Basically, just like these are hackers that are funded by a nation, which is why they're called nation state hackers. And then you've also got crime, which this pretty much boils down to like money laundering and other such, like the goal is to commit crime online. Like Silk Road would be a prime example of that. Now we'll move on to vulnerability mitigation. This is basically, most of it boils down to you're working as a cybersecurity person. You're going to have lots of devices, servers, computers, etc. And it's very likely that they're not all running the most up-to-date software on them, whether that's the operating systems or the applications on them. Vulnerability management is basically taking that. These are the stuff that we know is susceptible to attacks, and how can we best mitigate and remove that risk. This boils down to many different types of forms. And you also need to understand, like, what are some of the methods that people can exploit vulnerabilities. SQL injection, that involves using the SQL language to inject a command into it that gives you data that the owner does not want you to have. You've got buffer overflow, which surprisingly is probably like one of the most important attacks that happen. I believe you look at statistics, buffer overflow makes almost half of all of these types of app level attacks. Which buffer overflow, some of you don't know, it basically is if an application requests data through weird shenanigans that change based on whatever you're trying to do, you can overflow how much memory that it has and get the app to do unexpected things. And sometimes these unexpected things can mean getting access to stuff that you shouldn't see. But with vulnerability management, there kind of comes into some broad categories of how to deal with said vulnerabilities. Obviously, the most optimal and simple path is update your stuff. You can't, if you're not running the most up-to-date software, that usually fixes most of your problems. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, sometimes updating is not possible for a multitude of reasons. The most common ones are it is on critical infrastructure, meaning that if you update this, it will temporarily take it down, which sometimes is unacceptable, and you have to take weeks to get the permission to do that. It can sometimes be there is no update. Maybe this software that you're using is no longer at end of life. So you just have to deal with it some other way. The last option is also that you can't update it because the hardware can't handle the update. You literally saw that with Windows 11, where Windows 11 basically said that all these older devices, we're not going to let you use Windows 11 on that. Those are all examples of why you can't just update the software. So then you have to take extra measures to do that. Oftentimes this is through either isolation, where you physically segment the device into its own network to help prevent weird ways of third parties getting access to it to take advantage of vulnerability. It can also be access controls by limiting who can even touch this machine, so again, to reduce the risk of it getting exploited. You'll see this as a running thread in Security Plus. A very common thing that Security Plus really wants you to be thinking about and understanding is risk management. It is a very fundamental thing about Security Plus They want you to be able to look at problems and be able to assess its risk based on how bad it could be, based on the financial, what it could cause, and just keep that in your back mind, because a lot of questions kind of like circle back to like, is this risk something that is tolerable? Any questions so far? No? All right. Again, more frameworks. I mentioned we'd come back to this. These ones are frameworks that are focused on attack methods. So like these would be what a third-party attack might be thinking about when they're doing an attack on an organization. Again, Security Plus, not really focused on the red teamer aspect of it, but they just kind of want you to know what the MITRE attack and the cyber kill chain are and their rough purposes, which in both cases are all about the pathway a malicious actor would take to getting to compromise, which you can see in the MITRE attack frame. These diagrams, perfect. I'll probably post a link to this presentation in the Discord if any of you want to look at this later. But like I said, you probably won't do that because after the end of this, I'll show you way better resources for this. This is just the hodgepodge I put up with to give you guys a entry into this. So security architecture, a fun thing that you have to know about is all the ways a company might be operating their infrastructure. We live in the future, which means cloud exists, which means that there are lots of assets you'll be dealing with that you will never ever see in person because they're all hosted in the cloud. And it's becoming very common, though nowadays we are seeing a little bit more pushback on cloud, especially after some of the more recent cloud outages. But I'm almost certain that whatever job you would be working at, you will have at least some aspect of it in the cloud. And then you've got hybrid. Surprisingly, KSU used to have a hybrid environment because our Splunk instance, which if any of you want to know, Splunk is a Siemens, which is basically just it ingests all the logs that we produce through all of our different services. It gets ingested into Splunk, and it creates a giant data lake that we can query to get information on stuff. As pure basic. For the longest time, KSU was a hybrid Splunk model where we had servers on campus that were help process that, but then some of it would also be sent to the cloud for processing. But at this point, we are now fully on the cloud. But that would be an example of some hybrid environments are like some stuff are in the cloud, some are in person on servers, and sometimes it could even be the same service that's being done both on-prem and off-prem. And then speaking of infrastructure, we gotta talk about the security of it. It's important to have a good infrastructure security. You know, that means firewalls. Like you nowadays, you just firewalls are mandatory, both software and hardware. Firewalls are important for a multitude of reasons. Honestly, just the biggest honesty is just they just allow you to filter your traffic into more manageable bits that you can actually like personally manage. And it also just helps you from the onslaught of spam that exists on the internet. There's always malicious third parties just randomly sending pings out into the ether, hoping to find a hook that they can sink in. So just having a good firewall just prevents that initial like mass spraying of malicious attempts. VPNs are very important, especially if you have some level of remote workers, because VPNs are a great way of still having that firewall around your network, but still allowing your employees to access local-only resources in a protected way. And then air gaps for like super secure systems that you just have to protect. Air gaps are the best way to protect a system is to not have it be connected to the internet. So you see this often with military, high-level government, or like very important critical infrastructure. They'll actually have an air gap where it's completely isolated from the internet, and there is no physical connection that goes out of it. And we'll talk about briefly, if you truly don't know anything about network, I would recommend, even if you don't go take the Network Plus certification, at least study some of the resources. Having an understanding of how networks work, how computers connect with each other, how IPs work, it's a very important skill that it doesn't immediately become a problem, but it is something, it's almost information debt. Like, having this basic understanding of how networks works, you will be thanking yourself later for it. Because there's an amount of just random one-off questions or inquiries you might have that get solved by just knowing how networks work is very useful. And obviously, Security Plus, there are going to be questions that are going to ask you about this. Because, well, you might not see that many questions about like how networks work. You are going to see questions about like how to secure networks or how to configure networks in a secure way. Like one of the examples, what do they call it? PBQs. So on the exam, most of the questions are multiple choice, but there's usually like 3 to 5 PBQs, which they're not like essays style questions, but generally you'll be given some visuals in a moderately complex problem, and then just a bucket of things you can plop in there and be based asked like solve. Very bad description of what PBQs are, but they're kind of like very broad in like how they work. But they're just, you can just think of them as very interactive questions that involve you be given some sort of problem and to answer in a more complex way than just multiple choice. Yeah, I did a terrible job explaining that, but we'll move on. Funny joke. Does anyone understand why the bottom is worrisome? Yes?
Pineapple, I think.
Correct, you're correct. There's a hacking device called the Pineapple, and it basically is a, what's the term?
Like a rogue access point?
Yeah, thank you. Rogue access point. Basically, it lets you mimic Wi-Fi points, and you can do a lot of weird shenanigans with it. But that's the default IP address the Wi-Fi Pineapple starts out with. So if you're just connecting to like a coffee shop and you see that IP, likely means someone's doing some tomfoolery on you. Costs. So now we'll move into data protection. Again, this is where we're going to start touching in on the like financial aspects they might want you to know. But you'll need to understand the different types of data that exist that you need to be protecting. Because most of the time we think about like IPP as like the primary type of PPI information, private personal information. That is usually the most common thing people think of like what we do as cybersecurity to protect data. But there's a lot more to it than just that. They call it trade secrets, so like information specific to your company. They also call it legal information. So like if you're in a lawsuit, there's oftentimes data in lawsuits are protected and not allowed to be seen by the greater public. You also need to know data states, pretty straightforward. At rest means the data is currently in storage. Data in transit means the data is being moved from one computer to another. And then data in use is data that's currently in RAM or is being actively used by an application. So with all this data, what steps can we do to protect it? It depends on the data and what we need the data for. Because obviously, encrypting the data is just the best path forward. But sometimes, sometimes you can't use data if it's encrypted. So there's lots of different things that we can do to still have access to the data, but protect it from third parties. This involves hashing. Hashing is a type of obfuscation that basically is you can input data and get a token number out that can't be turned back into what was originally inputted, but it is completely unique to the input. So it can be used for validation and also prove integrity. For example, if you've ever installed a Linux distro from their website, oftentimes they'll have a hash on their website that you can use to compare to what you've installed to check, be like, hey, did what I install actually match what they think it is, or did someone slip in something in that download that should not be there? There's tokenization, which tokenization basically is basically you basically take the data and you create a token version of that data, and it's honestly mostly used for like data sets when you're training like AI or other types of algorithms as a way of not keeping that information in the computer, but the computer can still use the quote unquote values and weights of that data. Also, then there's segmentation.
I was gonna say tokenization is used on credit cards as well.
Good example. And then segmentation pops up again. Basically, it's like if you're storing your data, you probably shouldn't put all the data you collect as a company into one place. You should have them separated out onto different servers and different databases, so that if you get breached in one, you don't immediately just say, "Oh crap, all of our data has just been breached," which is very bad. So another important aspect is Security Plus is recovery. You'll see a few questions on it as well, which is basically just talking about like what are some of the basic steps that you can take as a cybersecurity professional to mitigate incidents when they do occur, and that's recovery. This comes in many different forms. It comes in the form of having images of your work laptop so that when you have to do a recovery, not that it's just that you have it, but it's relatively up to date. So that also means not just capturing the image initially, but every few weeks you're recapturing it. So when you have to do a reset, you're not losing months of work to it. Site redundancy depends on the scale of your company, but generally the bigger you go, you want to have redundancies where if this just completely fails, you're not immediately shut down and you have backups that you can fall back to. In recovery, it also talks about taking steps of preventative care. So this oftentimes can come in the form of tabletop exercises. Like, are you as a company helping educate your staff members on if something were to happen, what should you be doing? This isn't just limited to the cybersecurity people on the team, but also, some level of this education should be applied to every member on the team. Because oftentimes, if you're actually having a security breach, it's not just the people in cybersecurity that's like trying to fight them. You usually need members across your teams to help you identify and slow down the progress. And then maintenance. Not really recovery, but I just threw it in here anyways. But planned maintenance is important to making sure your software is at least relatively say up to date, because that is again a very common way that you get exploited. Foretell. So another one that is a lovely thing on the Sec Plus is you've got acronyms and then you've got ports. These are probably the only ports that you might need to know on the exam. More specifically, the most important ones are knowing that 80 is HTTP, knowing that SSH is on 22. Those are like those two specifically. Like I'm almost confident you will see a question on those two, and then the rest there'll be some mix of them on the exam. I would recommend finding a Quizlet of some kind of like the most common port numbers and just practicing them, because port numbers are a relatively important aspect of the exam, at least in terms of like this is just kind of just brute memorization. There's no fancy thing you can do here. Probably the most boring part of setting the exam was just these port numbers. And as you can see, I totally didn't rip this off a YouTube video that I had. Just ignore the top right part. And then finally, we'll go into security management and oversight. So, paperwork. We love paperwork, right? There are a lot, depending on where you go into cybersecurity, sometimes this is all you'll be doing, which is paperwork. You'll be writing policies and policies and policies. There are a ton, I won't get into the specifics, but just know that sometimes, depending on the type of cybersecurity job you work, sometimes you'll be the person who writes all the stuff about what is or isn't legal as a company to do in terms of information, in terms of data compliance and data storage, in the terms of which you're allowed to use computers and cameras and whatnot. It's honestly something that's growing. My understanding of it is that GRC, which is government risk compliance, is currently hot in demand. At least that's what my boss says. And that's pretty much a lot of it is just like reading and processing paperwork in regards to that. Though something that is probably more universal is incident responses. Knowing how to, when an incident occurs at wherever you're working, being able to formulate that into a nice document is probably something any cybersecurity person should at least be able to do, at least somewhat well. And then we'll get into what we were talking about earlier, risk. All cyber security plus, all about risk management and understanding risk. Here are some of the the acronyms you need to know. So RTO, RPO, MTTR, MTBF. I will not explain what those mean. Do that yourself. Those are all different metrics for basically saying when shit happens, how quickly are we able to come back from it? SLE, ALE, and ARO, all of that is about calculating when shit goes wrong, how much does that cost us? And you will need to know that I'm also confident you will be asked a question on the Security Plus exam that's going to be, that basically says, hey, we have this insurance that costs us $50,000 over 10 years. But then it quotes those are protecting us from a $10 million incident. What is the ARO of that? So it's simple, basic math, but you'll probably see at least one question based on that on the exam. But then also knowing that risk doesn't just come from internal, it comes from external sources. Because no company is a company without vendors and people that they either sell to or buy from. And they are a very common way of being exploited. At least whenever a vendor emails you about something important, you think that's a pretty important email. But then you realize that your vendor got their emails hacked, and then they sent the email to you, and you gave it a higher level of trust. So then you clicked on something and downloaded something that was malicious. All right. Now here's a fun game that I think some people have played since this part of the presentation was reused. Name that abbreviation. Woo!
Ooh, should we go?
So, does anyone know what SSH stands for? Yes. Boom, boom, bang. So your identification. CRL.
Control. Certificate verification list.
Ding, 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 ding.
I trained for this building.
ALE.
Annualize the loss expected.
Correct. Annual loss expectancy.
Good job, man. Manager.
What does CASP mean?
You know what?
I think I did.
Cloud Access Security Broker. I think you're right.
You just said it.
I was gonna say, someone else said it before you did it.
Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
it is Cloud Access Security Broker.
Cloud Access Security Broker. NIPS.
Nice.
This always gets everyone.
Network intrusion detection system.
Correct. That was a good one. Good one. Come on, you can give it a guess.
Typical mail transfer protocols.
Correct. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Boom. Going back to the little outlook, but PDF that they have on their website that goes over all their outlines. This was the 4 pages of acronyms I was talking about. Doesn't that look so beautiful and pretty? But yeah, so with that, that kind of goes to the end of my presentation. First off, is there any general questions you might have about the Security Plus exam or any topics I covered?
Do students get to take it for free?
Students get a discount, but not for free.
Dang.
And it's not a big discount.
It's
It's
pretty
still like,
good.
it's still like $300.
Oh, okay, but
That's still $100 off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is normally like 500.
okay,
Yeah, it's like $420, and then if you get the student discount properly with like your like .edu email, I think it breaks it down to like $240.
okay, that's not bad.
Any other questions? Alright, so the last thing I'll do real quick is walk you through some of the resources I personally used. Number one, YouTube. We love YouTube here. Dr. Messer, God bless his soul, great resource. This has like 100 episode playlist that you can just, either pick and choose the topics that you're struggling with, or, just sit down and just watch through it all and take notes. It's basically an entire class in video form. Cybercraft, really good specifically for the PDQs. So he has this whole course where he goes over example questions of PDQs, which is very useful because PDQs can be a little tricky sometimes, just because you might struggle a little bit of understanding exactly what they're asking for or how they want you to go about solving it. So going through some example problems there is very good at getting in the heads of the CompTIA people and how they want you to answer the extended questions. Next, we have Percipio. I've mentioned this before quite a few times, and I'll keep keep recommending it because if you're part of KSU, you just get this. It's a portal with all sorts of just educational resources. They have a lot of stuff not just about cybersecurity. So if you're just curious about learning something, just type it in here and see if you find something. But they do have a lot of cybersecurity specific stuff. They have entire pathways for Security Plus. But also if you're looking at doing other certifications or even just knowledge stuff, they've got courses on certain tools as well. They have video lectures on like how to use Splunk. They have lectures on I believe Wireshark and some other common tools you might see in the field. Before I forget, I put this here to remind myself. I was going to do this, but then I realized that I had a scheduling conflict. I will be posting this in the Discord, but Trent Elementary School is looking for volunteers for judges for a Vex robotics competition, which is basically Lego robotics. So if you're free the Saturday of February 7th and want to do some volunteering, I'll be posting this in the Discord. Yeah.
Are you allowed to insult the children?
You can email them and ask.
Okay.
I mean, you can insult them, but whether you're allowed to stay is another question.
Gotcha.
You can do it if you want to do that.
Yeah.
What did it last year?
Did you judge last year? How was it?
Alright, it's chill.
Yeah. There will be, I believe, free coffee and donuts, so if that encourages you, be my guest. I was going to do it, but last minute scheduling, and I realized the qualifiers for CCDC happens to be at the exact same day. And I'm pretty sure CCDC starts at 9 a.m. or something, which means I had to pick or choose, and I'm picking CCDC.
If you really hate kids, you probably can make them cry.
Well, I already do that.
When does CCDC start? The qualifier round? That one's remote, which I know.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it's multi-day too.
I don't think the qualifier is
Is it?
multi-day.
Then, yeah, I remember they open it up at either 9 or 10. But you've got to be there an hour before for sure. 'Cause they release all the stuff, whatever. But I can definitely take a look into it though.
I just tried looking at it and they just had no specific time on their website, so I was just curious, those who did it last year.
I've been scrambling the past few days, but I'll take a deep look into it and I'll let you know. Unless you're trying to pull it up now.
And the last resource for Security Plus I want to mention is these exams encompass one thing. They're all free. You just go on here and go on here. They have a ton of just practice questions that you can just work on. Just, I believe they're all like 10 or 15 questions long. So, they're a nice like 15, 20 minute practice test. And they have just general ones, but then they also have ones like broken down by subject. So there's a nice way to get practice questions. And that's all I had for the Security Plus little presentation I had pulled up. Thank you guys for coming, and unless anyone else has anything else to say, we will be closing for the day. And stay tuned. Next week, I'll be doing a presentation on privacy. You don't want to miss that one. It's going to be really interesting. I'm doing some deep dives into this. Yeah. Let me just thank you.
I can answer your question.
Yeah, what the fuck is that?
So I've been getting purple tier loot at Goodwill recently.
What?